Hello and welcome. I'm Peggy. Do make time for us today because this program is a life-saving program. And I'm honored to have the person sitting with me, and I want to share. We're going to talk about Emma's Law. And Emma's Law affects every person. It doesn't matter if you're a babe in a crib or a senior citizen. And it's changed what we do in our state. And here's the big newspaper with all about it. We need to know what it says and how it affects us. And I have an article that I cut out from the Greenville News, and my guest who wrote this article explains in detail exactly what it does and what it's supposed to do. And I was so thrilled when I read this, I called him up. And he's here with me now. And I'm honored to have Steve Sumner here, who is a defense attorney.
I am.
And he's a graduate of the University of South Carolina School of Law. And I could go on and on and on. He is a 100 top lawyer in South Carolina for the field of criminal defense. That's quite an honor.
Thank you. Listen, that's kind of you to say.
And you're a Granville gentleman.
I am. I was born and raised here in Granville County, went to Eastside High School. My parents, my father's deceased now, but my mom still lives here in Taylor's, and I've been living here all my life except for the time I was in law school.
So you are a defense attorney.
That's right.
And you basically are involved in DUI. That's what you are an expert.
Absolutely. When I got out of law school, I was a prosecutor for 2 years, and I was on a grant. I was as just a DUI prosecutor, and more than half of my caseload, Peggy, had to be either DUIs or felony DUIs or failure to stop for blue light. I did that for 2 years, and then I've been a defense attorney. I represent people vigorously that had been accused of drunk driving, and I've done that for about the last 20 years. So that is what I am. I'm just, as you see on television, a defense attorney. That is what I do. I do not prosecute cases. I work for an individual that has been accused.
Now, our government and our Constitution gives us the right to be defended.
Absolutely.
And until you are proven guilty, you are innocent. Now, that's what I think.
Yes.
That's what our Constitution says.
It does. It sometimes gets blurred a little bit, but you're exactly right. That's a wonderful point. We are all, as citizens, presumed to be not guilty of any criminal charge.
Guilty.
That is correct. And we can have a bench trial in front of a judge, but most of the time we have jury trials.
Yeah.
And everybody gets to put their presentation forward and questions are asked, and then a jury deliberates, and it takes a unanimous verdict in South Carolina before a conviction can occur. All 12 people must be convinced beyond any and every reasonable doubt that a person is guilty before a guilty verdict can be rendered.
Okay, now I would like to ask you, if you could, explain Emma's Law so that simple folk, all of us, including me, can understand the law, because when there's something like this, there's always confusion.
Absolutely, and I'm glad to do that. And I was thrilled when you gave me a call a few weeks ago and asked me to come on here and talk with you and to talk with your viewers. First of all, Emma's Law does not change the basic fundamental DUI law in South Carolina. And the law is that it is not, first of all, it's not against the law to consume alcoholic beverages and drive a vehicle. Now, I'm not endorsing that, but I'm telling you that simply the act of drinking alcohol and driving a vehicle and or motorcycle or a car is not against the law. What is against the law is to consume so much alcohol to any degree of excess that your ability to drive is both materially and appreciably impaired by alcohol. Okay?
And this, of course, drugs play into this too.
Yeah, exactly. It's actually our statute, Peggy, says either alcohol, drugs, or a combination of both.
Okay.
Now, let me talk about something else, and I'm going to answer that question in a minute. But prescription medication also is subject to DUI law, and because when you get a prescription bottle, if it's a painkiller, whatever it is, a medication to help you sleep, you will see on the bottle, be careful about operating heavy machinery, which would include a car. So a lot of people think, well, if I'm only taking my prescription as as is prescribed, 2 or 3 pills a day, then I'm fine to drive. Well, the bottom line is if that impairs your ability to drive your vehicle, then no. You would then be subject to being charged with DUI. So it's alcohol, drugs, or a combination of both. That was not changed by Emma's Law. Our definition of drunk driving or DUI was not changed by Emma's Law. Emma's Law primarily addresses repeat and serial drunk drivers. And what it did was it expanded something called an ignition interlock device. Now, Peggy, what that is...
Yeah, that's confusing to people.
Well, it's a big name for basically, and it's right here in the picture, and I'm just going to bend down for a second and get this, and I'm going to put it over in front of this camera. This would be an ignition interlock device. Now, this is a picture of a lady blowing into this device as she is beginning to start her car. And it is basically, Peggy, it is a portable breathalyzer that is installed on a person's vehicle, and they have to blow into it before it's wired into the ignition. And before a person can start the car, they have to blow into it. And as long as their alcohol is 0.02, which is a very, very, very small amount, that's 0.02%, which is 2/100ths of 1%. As long as they have less than 2/100ths of 1% alcohol, as picked up by the machine, then they can crank the car. Okay, and the person has to continue to randomly blow into it as they drive down the road. That is called an ignition interlock device.
Okay.
And what happens is they've been around for a while, but what Emma's Law did was it is significantly expanding the applicability of an ignition interlock device to people that had been convicted the first time of drunk driving. And that is what is the main that's the main thrust of Emma's Law, is that it is, if somebody registers a 0.15 or higher on the breath test, or if they refuse a breath test, even as a first offense, they are going to have that device for 6 months. Now, another point of Emma's Law is that you cannot sit out the suspension. Let's say you know somebody that is convicted of DUI in a court of law, and in the past, they could just choose to sit out. So I'm just not going to drive for 6 months. Yeah. You cannot do that anymore under Emma's Law. It is a lifetime suspension if you don't take the ignition interlock program and take the 6 months and complete it. You will never be able to return to your regular license. Now, so that was the main thing that Emma's Law did, was expand this. Now, I'm going to go ahead and keep talking a little bit about where does this come from and why did we adopt this in South Carolina. Well, there was a study released, Peggy, and I don't remember right now for your viewers the name of the entity that did the study, but it was very extensive. And it found that over 60%, and I quote that in the editorial in the Greenville News, that about 67% of the fatalities in drunk driving, in horrible drunk driving accidents, involve repeat offenders, okay, and involve repeat offenders.
That was one of my big questions. How does this happen?
How did this happen? And so a big study, and the data is that about 2/3 of every one of those collisions, and I want to get it right out here, they're terrible, and the tragedies, there's no question that that all of our hearts break when we read or hear about that. That when they involve alcohol, Peggy, that they involve the at-fault driver that has had a drunk driving conviction, or actually multiple drunk driving convictions in their past. So the question became, how can we change this behavior as a society, as a legislator, as a legislative body? How can we change this? And Emma's Law was designed with the ignition interlock device to get people of that nature in the habit of not consuming alcohol and then driving a vehicle. And that in the course of 6 months, now if it's your second conviction, then the ignition interlock is a 2-year requirement. If it's a third conviction, it's a 3-year requirement, okay? And if it's your fourth conviction, it is a lifetime requirement that you have one of these devices in your car.
Do they have to pay for the...
Yes. The taxpayer is not paying any money for this.
Okay.
The individual has to pay to have the device installed. The individual has to pay to have it maintained and recalibrated every so often by the probation folks that are going to be administering the program. So there's no cost to the taxpayers, and what it comes down to is a new technology, a new approach to curbing repeat and serial drunk drivers from being involved in fatal accidents.
People have asked, somebody said to me, well, that really isn't going to work because what if you have a friend who hasn't had anything to drink and you let them blow into it? The device isn't going to know whether it's you or your friend.
Yeah, it is. They got a camera in them.
Okay.
How about that?
Okay.
They got a
thought
camera
of everything.
They do. They have a camera in them, and part of Emma's Law beefed up substantially the penalties for a person who helps you. So let's say you and I are driving together, and we go to a restaurant and we're out eating dinner, which would be certainly a fun thing for you and I to do one day. And you have 3 or 4 glasses of wine, and I have one, and you're the one that drove us there, and you're under this ignition interlock requirement, and you say, Steve, I need you to blow in this thing because this thing won't start my car. So I'm going to get in, I'm going to drive, I'm going to let you bend over, and I'm going to let you blow into it. It takes a picture. And I know what it does. It takes a picture, and the probation folks are the ones that are going to administer this. That data is sent, like so many things now, and technology is unbelievable. That data is downloaded and sent to their computers, and any point in time they can randomly go through and see. And there are very stiff penalties, Peggy, for people like me in that situation that help you get around that requirement. I don't have the penalties right off the top of my head, but you don't want to go there. That's right. You don't want to go there. The second thing is you don't want to tamper with it or disable it because that's also punished, and that's punished separately, as a separate offense. So all of those angles have been covered by the legislature, and it's going to be, they've taken all that into account, and that's something I'm commonly asked too. Well, Steve, just the example you gave, of course I can have my sister or my friend or my child, whoever, blow into the machine, and the answer is no, you can't. You can do it right then. You can do it right then, but probation can go back and look and say, guess what? We've got it right here, and we've got Steve Sumner's face right here. I don't know who this is, but you're in trouble and he's in trouble.
Well, anyone who stops and thinks knows that our highways are treacherous and dangerous.
There's no question about that.
And we need to take drastic steps. And the drinking age is 21.
Correct, it is.
So anyone over 21 does not break a law if they choose to drink.
No, they do not.
But where they break the law is if they drink and get behind the wheel of a car.
If they drink excessively, I'm going to correct you on one thing. I know you and I may have a friendly disagreement on that point, but I want to make sure excessive alcohol consumption to the degree that it impairs your ability to drive, that's drunk driving, and that is against the law. But there is responsible alcohol consumption, if it does not affect significantly the way you're driving your car, that is not against the law.
But that's going way out in left field because alcohol affects people differently.
Correct.
And a great big strong strapping guy like you could probably take a few drinks and it wouldn't show, where maybe someone who isn't used to drinking or somebody who is a petite person, they're going to have a different reaction.
That is
so who's going to judge that?
The jury. A jury is told at the end of the evidentiary phase of a trial, the jury, which is really, that's one of the things that makes America great. There are a lot of things that make America great, but our Constitution and our right to a jury trial are one of the most, our judicial system comes under a lot of criticism, but it is one of the best systems in the world. We hear about isolated examples, Peggy, where it didn't quite work right, but the overwhelming majority of the time, juries get it right. And the jury makes a decision of whether or not they believe, after hearing all the evidence and hearing an arresting officer testify and having me cross-examine, whether or not it's been proven beyond any reasonable doubt. And so the jury makes the decision of whether or not you've had too much to drink.
We all need to be mindful of the fact that it is dangerous.
It is.
And if you're a parent out there, talk to your kids, talk to your teenagers. And we need to be safe and save lives. And you can still go on with your life. Nobody's saying
Yeah.
you couldn't have a drink if you're over 21, if that's
Right.
what you want to do. But this law changes everything, and we all need to know that. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.